You guys almost ready to go to the Hill and win them over? Yeah? I have been so impressed by the turnout this weekend. I think that there are over 1,500 people here who are about to take the Hill by storm, and also I think in February going to continue to advocate on these issues as part of the Ignatian family. And I am so proud to be part of the Ignatian family and standing up here. I wanted to share with you a quote from my boss, the president of the Jesuit Conference of the United States, in an article that was published yesterday in the Houston Chronicle. Quoting Father Ignacio Echeverria, he said, "The social and political destiny of El Salvador, whether we like it or not, depends to a large extent on the United States government. It is therefore," said Echeverria, "of the utmost importance that the United States carry out a foreign policy in Central America which is both informed and just." Father Kasicki went on to say, "Informed and just is a good litmus test, but it's one that the U.S. still can't seem to pass when it comes to Central America." Current policy towards Central America's Northern Triangle is part of a long and tangled tradition of U.S. policy that vacillates between destructive engagement and neglect. Let's remember that after those really destructive wars in Central America in the 1990s, which were really proxy wars that were rooted in the Cold War, a lot of politicians just kind of wanted to pack up and leave and wash their hands, right? We left countries absolutely in a state of destruction, bombed out cities, mangled neighborhoods, displaced people who had to return to their homes and rebuild their lives, and states that were in a really fragile condition. And into that mess that we left these countries in after waging these proxy wars came the cartels which are delivering drugs to our border for our consumption. On the other hand, in the years that followed, as the drug wars ramped up, we began to continue to partner heavily with military and police as part of prosecuting the drug war, even while more and more evidence emerged showing armed forces were deeply implicated and continue to be deeply implicated in the types of corruption, abuse, and organized crime that continues to make Central America one of the most violent places on this planet. This has created an environment ripe for exploitation and control by organized crime and compelled tens and thousands of children and families and asylum seekers to flee their homes in search of safety. Now, as children and families arrive on our border asking for protection, some policymakers want to deny the violence and inequality that continue to haunt Central America's Northern Triangle, deny that violence has evolved to particularly target children and youth, journalists, campesino farmers, and human rights defenders. This summer, as news of our overwhelmed border patrol facilities holding children broke, we saw a cacophony of assertive opinions and ideology charading as fact. Folks saying that Central America has been violent forever, so the uptick in children and families arriving at our borders couldn't have anything to do with that violence. That lax border policy was the reason that children were arriving, or that the right of unaccompanied children to have their cases evaluated in court was encouraging them to come to our borders. We know differently. These are the facts. Community leaders in both Honduras and El Salvador report gangs have grown more aggressive in recent years, instituting join or die policies in some neighborhoods that has absolutely besieged communities and driven people to be forced to internally relocate. Honduras has had the highest murder rate in the world for 4 straight years. The rate of disappearances, of forced disappearances, rose by 281% in 2013. In El Salvador, there was a 93% increase in disappearances in 2013, according to our own State Department. And in Honduras, from 2005 to 2012, murders of women and girls increased by 346%, while murders of men and boys increased by 292% over the same period. This region has not always been this violence. This is a new situation, and it's causing people to search for safety beyond their borders. El Salvador and Guatemala have the highest rates of violence against women in the world, and homicides targeting women have begun to increase rapidly in Honduras as well, and Honduras recently joined the top 10 countries for femicides. We need to demand that our policymakers take the time to understand what's going on, not just jump to the most politically convenient conclusion. Many of the children and families who have arrived in our country and at our borders are fleeing very direct threats and acute harms. When someone disputes this fact in one of your meetings, or when someone disputes it in your community, when someone tries to shoehorn the real crisis in these 3 countries into a neat narrative about the need for U.S. immigration enforcement, I hope we can all ask, who are they listening to? And encourage them to listen to people like Padre Melo, who knows the situation on the ground, people like the analysts at the UCA, who have done extraordinary work documenting internal displacement in El Salvador, people like the analysts at the Landiver in Guatemala, who likewise started to really track the way in which migration and violence have been linked in the Northern Triangle. Just to review our ask really quickly, we want our country to invest in the right of Central Americans, especially Salvadorans, Hondurans, and Guatemalans, to live and have sustainable lives in their countries of origin. We want the U.S. to be investing in stability, but not through militarizing the region or supporting corrupt police forces. We want them to stop doubling down on wrong-headed militarization policies and partnering with these corrupt and undemocratic actors. Rather, we should provide resources and technical assistance for shelters for women and girls who have been the targets of sexual violence, strengthen in-country child welfare systems, ensure that civil society, that the churches, the journalists, the intellectuals are at the table when decisions are being made about what the steps are forward for these countries. Another ask, the U.S. must not encourage or finance programs that degrade the ability of people fleeing violence to access safety in other countries. There's this new and disturbing trend of the U.S. not only militarizing our own border, but militarizing the border of Mexico, militarizing the border of Honduras, and militarizing the border of Guatemala. This summer, we literally stood up troops on the Honduran border to keep children from fleeing Honduras. That is unacceptable, and it's actually a violation of international law. We must not continue to finance those programs. These programs endanger the lives of people seeking safety and run counter to our country's humanitarian ideals and obligations. And a third ask is, of course, when people arrive here in the U.S., we must ensure that Central Americans fleeing harm have had a full and fair process for accessing refugee protection and other protections under U.S. immigration and humanitarian law. The U.S. must live up to its values of fairness and justice, ensuring that people, children, and families seeking safety within our borders have the ability to tell their stories and have their cases evaluated within an age-appropriate and timely system. We must not water down protections meant to ensure that traumatized and terrorized victims of persecution or torture or trafficking have the ability to make their case for humanitarian relief. As we approach complicated policy issues, we should strive to listen first and foremost to the voices of people living at the epicenter of the violence in Central America. Again, people like Padre Melo, people like his team, like the analysts at the UCA and the Landiver. Our government's policy must be informed in order to be just. And they should be informed by our voices as well, not by political expediency. We must remember, and we must call our policymakers to remember, that human lives are at stake. Thank you.